my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be going over the 11 books I read in the month of February. Before we get started, to address the elephant in the room, I have in fact chopped off all my hair. So it is drying so much faster, but it is taking some getting used to. But regardless, the books that I read in the month of love, I read 10 books, like I said, some of them by audiobook, which, yes, in my personal opinion, is reading, and one novella. So, without further ado, let's get started. The first book I finished in the month of February was an audiobook. It was The Witch Collector by Sharissa Weeks. I will pop the cover up right here. I ended up rating this book 3 stars. The premise is about a girl who is seeking revenge on the witch collector for taking her sister Nephili prior to the events of the book. So every harvest moon, this witch collector comes and chooses a witch of unique talent or exceptional power to bring to the Frost King, whose name is Colden. Colden, which is a little nail on the head, but you know, whatever works. And she is seeking vengeance on him for, in her view, ruining her family. However, you find out pretty quickly that not all is as it seems, and they have to form a tentative alliance in an effort to try and help save their kingdom and their people. And in doing so, of course, they start to grow closer. Now, it wasn't really the conflict or the plot that I had an issue with. I just didn't love the romance. I just wasn't sold on the two of them. Raina, the FMC, went from absolutely hating his guts to lusting over him. It almost felt insta lust. Once she got over her issues with him or her prejudices against him, she just started wanting to jump his bones. And there's a line in the book at some point where he says, it's only been 2 weeks, but I would kill anybody. I would do anything for her. So it's just a bit insta love, which is not my favorite. But the premise is really interesting, and it's a 3-book series called The Witch Walker. So I will be continuing it at some point. It's just not going to be top priority for me to continue. Now, the second book I read was A Reign of Rose, which is the 3rd book in the Sacred Stones trilogy. Now, I really, really enjoyed this series as a whole, so if you've not read it already, I would highly recommend it. But without saying too much, the premise of the book is about Arwen. She is initially believed to just be a little old healer, and that's what she believes of herself. And her kingdom is invaded by the kingdom of Onyx. So she lives in Amber. All of these countries and nations are named after stones. So obviously Onyx, Amber, Pearl, Peridot, all of that. So she is raised to believe that she is a healer, and at some point her brother brings home trouble with him, and she gets kidnapped and whisked off to the kingdom of Onyx. Of course, she meets someone tall, dark, handsome, shadow daddy, which we all love, or maybe that's not your style, but it is mine. And the plot continues from there. So, like I said, I won't tell you too much about this one, just because this is book 3. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very satisfactory conclusion to the trilogy. Like I said, 4 stars. It didn't have me in a chokehold, so I'm not going to rate it 5 stars. But was I thoroughly entertained? Yes, absolutely. So after Reign of Rose, I ended up picking up Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. Now, I really enjoyed this book. I ended up rating it 4.5 stars. I think a big contributor to that, though, was the fact that I did not know everything about the brief or how this book was marketed before going into it. I knew it was a sports romance, but I didn't realize that it was meant to be kinky erotica. And I can understand why a lot of people feel cheated and shorted, because they do a lot of circling right under the surface of that, but never going all the way in. If you're really leaning into that, then you would be disappointed, I think. But I just knew it was a sports romance. Ali Hazelwood's first sports romance, and it delivered for me. Now, the premise of this book is Vandy, Scarlet, nicknamed Vandy, her best friend and her best friend's boyfriend end up breaking up because they have different preferences on what kind of spice they like. Luca and Vandy's taste and spice better aligns. And so when they break up, her best friend pushes Luca towards her, which gave me a little bit of, like, he's not yours to give away, he's his own person. And that was kind of like the start of my issues with Vandy's friend. She continued to be a horrible friend, and you just kind of dislike her the further and further you get into the book, or at least I did. I think it was a very human portrayal, but that doesn't make it any more likable. So I was really sold on the chemistry between these two. I read this book in one sitting, but I can understand why there are mixed reviews about it for sure. So the next book I picked up in February was One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. Now I realize I am so very late to this party, but it was totally worth the wait. I ended up rating this book 4 stars. The premise of this book is our main character, Elspeth, lives with a voice in her head, or the nightmare as she calls him. The magic system in this world is very unique. It's based on a deck of cards numbering, and there are 12 different kinds or 12 different categories. So the 12th layer of cards is the least rare. It's called the Black Knight. It grants super strength and that sort of thing, like physical gifts. And then you get more and more rare. So there's a card that grants beauty, and there's a card that grants invisibility and that sort of thing, and a card who forces people to tell the truth. But essentially, Elspeth is living in this world where people are desperately trying to collect these cards because, one, they want the power, and then two, as far as the king is concerned, he's trying to break this curse. Now, Blunder, the country or the world that Elspeth lives in, is slowly being consumed by this fog, and when someone is touched by this fog, they are infected with a fever that will either kill them, or if they survive it, they are left with some out of control power, or a power that costs them as they use it and will eventually lead to their destruction. So, most excellent book, would definitely recommend. And with that being said, I loved it so very much that I went other way around. I loved it so very much that I went right into Two Twisted Crowns. I rated this book 5 stars. A big, big factor of me loving this book was the ending, so I can't really speak too much on it. I thought the adventures that they go on and the quests that they're trying to complete and to save the world was excellent, but the ending was so satisfying. I feel like we just got our just desserts. Our people who were crappy got their punishments, and I love that. And also, I really liked the romance in here. I felt like their relationship was on the subtler side, but well earned. The two of them were, to me, very much a slow burn, and it was very well matched between the two of them. So, with that being said, I then went into Tangled Up in You by Christina Lauren, which was a library copy, so I do not have it with me, but I'll pop it right up here. This book is part of a series of princess story retellings. So this is a retelling of Rapunzel. And with that being said, that kind of tells you the premise of the book. But essentially, our female main character lives a very sheltered life on this homestead. She's homeschooled. She's been raised to be very, very independent and self-sufficient. And she convinces her parents to let her go to college. The reason I rated it 3 stars and not higher is because it is technically speaking, it's a contemporary romance, and I wasn't sold on the romance. I really enjoyed the plot. I really, really loved the mystery and how it was unraveled about her upbringing and how she came to be where she was. It was just so insta love between the two of them. And as we talked about with The Witch Collector, that was just not my favorite. But, it is also kind of understandable. So I guess I got what I was sold in a way. Like the book does a good job of you know, being a retelling of Rapunzel, but I just think that what I find endearing and what I love about the movie just did not translate on page to contemporary romance, which is not the author's fault, just maybe I don't pick up anything else from that series. So after that, I picked up one of my most anticipated releases for 2025, Rebel Witch. So everybody and their mother, I feel, has already read this book and put out their review of this book, but that's okay. We are here and we are happy to be here. I really, really loved the first book. It was one of my best books of 2024, and this book did not disappoint. I don't want to go too much into this plot in case you haven't read it yet, because I don't want to spoil it for you or anything like that. But I'll talk about the plot of the first book, which is in the US called The Heartless Hunter, and in the UK called The Crimson Moth. Can I just say I'm not a huge fan of the US covers, or really the UK covers. I really loved Fairy Loot's edition, but at the time I was not a Fairy Loot subscriber, so I missed it. And now, of course, the resellers are just, they want an arm, a leg, a kidney, everything. The plot of the first book, before I went off on my little tangent about cover art, is about a witch named Rune, who is a vigilante trying to save other witches from the guard. Now, when Rune was a child, her country was ruled by a set of Witch Queen sisters who were very morally corrupt, who were very poor rulers, who mistreated their people. And because of that, they were overthrown. And when that happened, the new regime very much went in the other direction, very much anti-witch, witch hater. They go about rounding up witches and executing them. So, preceding the events of the first book, Rune's grandmother tells her to turn her in. That way, Rune is not suspected of being a witch, because if she was, why on earth would she betray her own grandmother like that? And that allows Rune to continue living a very privileged life. She is one of the aristocracy in this country. And she uses her position of power to collect information and then use that information to vigilante or to moonlight as the Crimson Moth and save witches. So at the start of the first book, she goes to save a witch that her grandmother told her was important, only to find that she was beaten there by the guard. And in order to try to rescue this witch, she decides to cozy up under the guise of a vapid socialite to the head of the guard, Gideon, who suspects her of being the Crimson Moth. And because of that, he's trying to get closer to her under the guise of a fake relationship. So it is fake dating, enemies to lovers, very much grumpy sunshine. And of course, the first book ends with a shocking twist, and that leads us into this book. This book, I think, had really, really good adventures, and I think that it did a really good job of expanding the world. But without going too much into it, I really think you should read this book. I'm going to rate it 5 stars. All right, after that, I read Off to the Races by Elsie Silver. Now, this is her first book in the Chestnut Springs series. I believe is it her debut? I think it might be her debut. But it is definitely one of her earlier works. Now, this is about Billy and Vaughn. Vaughn inherits this racehorse program from his grandfather. and is trying to revamp it because before his grandfather dies, a scandal comes out that kind of ruins the family's reputation. And so, as part of Vaughn's plan to rework the family image so that they can start racing horses again and be taken seriously at the track, he brings in a up and coming trainer from Europe named Billy. Now, Billy has her own secrets and her own reasons for wanting to be on this farm, and on this project training these horses. And the two of them just butt heads. Like they just immediately bring out the most confrontational parts of each other. I love the banter in this. I will say though, like it could use a little bit of like cutting down just a little bit. And I think Vaughn kind of has more of like a stock kind of personality than like her later works, like the Chestnut Springs series. So I just Vaughn was a little bit flat for me as a male main character, but I really loved Billy's character. I really loved her motivations and what she was trying to accomplish, and the fact that she very much stood her ground where she needed to. So, with that being said, I rated this book 3.5 stars. Like I said, I just felt like it was a little chunky, and Vaughn was not my favorite MMC, but that is totally fine. I will be continuing on with this series. And that means, of course, that I ended up reading Out of the Gate, which is the prequel novella. And the prequel novella is about Vaughn's grandparents and their story. I'm not going to give it a star rating because I feel like with a novella, that's just not fair. But it was just really short, sweet, to the point. Essentially, Vaughn's grandmother has been lusting after somebody who is significantly older than her. And one night everything changes, and then he is promptly deployed. And so the novella picks up off where he comes back to the farm and they have to work out kind of the cliffhanger that they left everything on. After that, I ended up reading Good Girl, Bad Blood, which is the second book in a Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy by Holly Jackson. In this book, we are following Pip as she tries to solve the mystery of a friend's older brother's disappearance. Initially, she tries to get the police to do it because she has sworn off detective work, and they are really not all that interested in pursuing it. They feel like it's not a great use of police resources because the brother is an adult and has a history of falling off the map. So Pip feels that this is a unique enough circumstance to break her new personal rule of not meddling. And she has this new rule because after the events of the first book, she has kind of become a very polarizing figure. It's negatively affected her relationship with her parents and with her friends and with the town. And while she kind of very much enjoys and gets a thrill out of uncovering mysteries, it has, like I said, negatively affected her relationships with people, and that's kind of made her consider if this is something she should be indulging in. So I ended up reading this book 4 stars. I did not love it as much as the first one, but I did really, really like it. I'm not the world's biggest thriller mystery person, but I do really, really enjoy these books, and I can see myself rereading them in the future. So, and then to end us off, I listened to Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales. Now, I am so sad to see this series come to an end. For the last couple years, I have pounced on the audiobook the moment it came out and then listened to it as I did a puzzle. So, this being the last book in the series means that my yearly tradition in February is unfortunately over. But this series is kind of an odd one for me. As a whole, I think it's 5 stars. But individually, I never rated one of the books more higher than 4. So I just think overall, it's just a very like charming series. So the books follow obviously the titular character Emily Wilde. She is a dryadologist, and she studies fairy and the creatures of fairy. And in doing so, she keeps getting herself into these scrapes. She is also a very awkward person, a very blunt person, a person who doesn't do a good job of like reading the room and therefore sometimes offends the wrong person in the pursuit of her research. She's very single minded about her research. But this book follows her and her partner as they take over Wendell's kingdom. And then all of the chaos and mayhem that follows. I think it's not everybody's bookish taste, but I enjoyed it. So I think it's worth giving a try. Maybe borrow the audiobook. I really loved the narrator's voice. I felt like she very much embodied Emily. So, with that being said, those are all the books I read in the month of February. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed the video, please like it. If you would like to be around for a while, please subscribe. But either way, I appreciate you watching. Have a good day. Bye.